Okay, we will start our program this evening. Wheaton Arts is thrilled to celebrate its 50th anniversary with you tonight. As one of the most unusual and creative landmarks in the Northeast, we're excited to be celebrating 50 years this year. Founded by glass magnate Frank Wheaton Jr., the first Wheaton Arts buildings opened to the public in 1970. 50 years later, Wheaton Arts has become an international hub for artists exploring the limits of their creativity and a reception for the region's cultural diversity. It has additionally earned regional, national, and international recognition for its unique collections and programs. In just 2 weeks, you can look forward to another Wheaton conversation with Charlotte Potter and Kim Hardy, and that's on the 19th of November at 6 p.m. Kim and Charlotte are both mothers, makers, educators, and hold administrative leadership roles in their respective institutions. In this conversation, the artists will discuss how, as educational culture, we are shifting expectations and materials in the pandemic. As mothers, they will touch upon the uncanny nature of raising children amidst these unusual circumstances. I'm going to take a couple minutes here, or a couple seconds here, to help you make your experience a little more comfortable with a few tech tips. You can read over this, but most importantly, I would like to remind you that the Q&A window is what allows you to ask questions of our guests tonight. As an attendee, you can also like other attendees' questions. In the chat box, and notice that little icon for the chat that's different from the Q&A. You can follow along for links to additional resources and text between attendees. Maybe you'll see a friend in the chat box. Should you lose connection for any reason, please close all the windows, then click on your original email, and you won't have any trouble just getting right back in. This session is being recorded, but again, as a webinar, you'll know that just the host and the panelists will be recorded. And one last tip is that in the upper left-hand corner of your screen, you'll notice there's a small green icon. And if you click on that icon, the meeting information, you'll see a gear. And by clicking on that gear, you can make some adjustments to your own experience. There may not be too much that you need to do tonight, except maybe adjust the level of the chat. That would be under accessibilities, but otherwise you'll know it's there. And as you enjoy this free webinar, I would like you to keep in mind that there are 3 ways to support Wheaton Arts, and they are membership, donations, Shop Wheaton Arts, and shopping at shopwheatonarts.org. If you'd like more information on other ways to support Wheaton Arts and different types of support, you can contact Rhodey Barron, our Director of Development, and I'll put that information in the chat. As I mentioned, membership is a great way to support Wheaton Arts, and that is a way for you to get all that Wheaton Arts has to offer. And gift memberships are always available, and at this season, it's something to think about. It is pumpkin season at Wheaton Arts, and Skitchmania is behind the scenes creating many pumpkins each day. And also, you may notice that we have our new hours listed here. We're open Saturdays and Sundays currently from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. You can visit the Museum of American Glass, the Down Jersey Folklife Center, and the museum stores. Again, if you can't make it or you would like to take advantage of our curbside pickup, visit shop.wheatonarts.org and you'll find many of those beautiful pumpkins there. And now I'm going to turn this over to Iveta Virgova, and she is the Director of the Department of Folklife and Cultural Studies at Wheaton Arts. Avetta has worked, or over the years, she has worked with over 60 ethnic and regional communities in New Jersey, striving to preserve and share their cultural heritage. With a primary interest in cultural expressions of ethnicity and identity, as well as relativity of aesthetics and artistry, Dr. Pirgova has designed a series of educational and public programs. She is active in several professional associations, including New Jersey Folklore Society, Mid-Atlantic Folklore Association, American Folklore Society, and the American Anthropological Association. She's a member of ICOM and is currently the chair of Research Commission of IOV. Avetta, will you take it over now, please?
Thank you very much, Marcy. Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm so happy to see how many people are coming and from so many different places. I saw in the chat box we had people from New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Washington State, Oregon, but also Germany and the UK. So at this time, I would like to introduce to you the two artists who will participate in our conversation. It is my great pleasure to introduce our lead artist tonight, Tyrese Bright Flower Gould Jacinto. Tyrese is a member of the Nanticoke Lenape Indian tribe. She is the daughter of the late Phyllis Red Deer and Chief Mark Quiet Hawk Gould. Her parents were among a core group that initiated the modern-day structure of the Asian tribe. This allowed her to be immersed in tribal life as a child and to begin understanding the value of arts and traditions from an early age. Tyrese is a talented artist engaged in a variety of traditional Lenape arts: beadwork, basket weaving, wampum belts, shellwork, leatherwork, pine needle, and gourd arts. The mother of 5 children and 2 grandchildren, she is eager to pass on Lenape traditions to future generations. In her words, if we don't share, they will not remember us. Over the years, Thais participated in a variety of educational programs featuring Lenape traditional art. She teaches workshops and classes at Lenape youth summer camps, local libraries, schools, and art galleries. She also published a series of children books to pass on the stories of the tribe to their young and created video materials aimed at deeper understanding of Lenape culture and artistic expressions. It is also a great honor for me to introduce Chief Mark Quiethawk Gould. He is known among his people, the Nanticoke Lenape Indian tribe of New Jersey, as a leader who has worked tirelessly on their behalf since the 1970s till present day. He is the first elected tribal chairman under the modern-day structure of the tribe and has been instrumental in preserving the tribe's rich history and culture for more than 40 years. Chief Gould is also a master artist who had several apprentices receiving folk art apprenticeship grants from the New Jersey State Council on the Arts for Lenape water drums and Lenape powwow drums. His drums have been on display at the tribal headquarters, Wheaton Arts and Cultural Center, Rutgers University, schools and libraries throughout the state. His words, making the drums and any other traditional crafts, means going back to the ancestors and do it in the same way, or we will lose the meaning. Many people prefer the new ways because they are easy, but with the old ways, they gain a different understanding of our culture. Margot continues to educate tribal members, teachers, students, and others through apprenticeships, public presentations, and demonstrations. Chief Gould also participates in conferences on Lenape cultural heritage and gives lectures on Lenape history, culture, and traditions. Welcome to you both. I will now turn this over to you, Tyrese.
First of all, I just want to say thank you for having me here and for this wonderful opportunity to present to you. I want to say a special thank you to Iveta for her encouragement and Marcy for her countless hours in technology assistance. And I think that this is a wonderful opportunity, not only just for myself, but for tribal artists and for Iveta's many years of participation with our tribe and to help our tribe to maintain its culture and to share with others. So I just wanted to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. This is Wheaton's Conversations, and my name is Tyrese Brightflower Gould Jacinto. And we're featuring the Infinity Spiral Pine Needle Art and the No Face Ancestor Gourd Art. What is dear to me is my ancient Lenape arts. Mastering gourd art and infinity spiral weaving have been a tradition that's been close to my heart. And it delights me to be able to show you my infinity spiral weaving and gourd art. I also use this spiral pine needle and gourds for my regalia and traditional dress. This is a picture of me at the 2019 powwow in the dance circle. And here's the same powwow in my full regalia with my husband, Victor. I am the mother of 5 children and 2 grandchildren, and I am eager to pass on my Lenape traditions to them. If we do not persevere and teach, these arts will not continue to be passed down. And it's my pleasure to be able to pave the road for future generations. And in this picture, this was taken on October 12th of my daughter's 30th birthday. She's child number 2. My oldest is 31 and my youngest is 16. And also in this picture are my granddaughters, 5 and 3. Over the years, I've participated in a variety of educational programs featuring Lenape traditional arts at Wheaton Arts and Cultural Center. It brings me honor to teach workshop classes at Lenape Youth summer camps, local libraries, schools, and art galleries, and then You Today. And this picture is of the 2014 Wheaton Arts Festival, where I demonstrated etching of the scallop shells and pine needles, and I also brought other items that I make.
Hi, well, is this a good time to ask the audience if there's any educators in the audience?
Yeah, if there's any educators in the audience, that's a good question. I do have a series of websites and YouTubes that you could tap into. So if there are any educators, you can let me know, or you can contact me after this, and I can help you with any online meetings or Zoom videos or something similar to this. So if there are any educators, thank you, Marcy, for reminding me, because I did want to ask that.
Awesome, great.
And I've also published a series of children's books to pass on the stories of the tribe to our young. And I've created video materials aimed at deeper understanding of the Lenape culture and artistic expressions in history. Storytelling is an ancient part of our existence. This is going to be a video of my father, Chief Quiet Hawk Gould, Mark Gould, reading a book that I wrote in honor of him, that a Whistlewind song that he's reading to my granddaughters. And I just wanted to show you this video because this is what we are, this is how we exist, and it's teaching and it's storytelling, and it's continuing with our generations. And this is the name of the
That's
book.
me.
That's you?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Grammy's got everybody in here. Who's that? You know that guy?
That's you.
Oh, that's
Who's
me.
that, Talia? Who's that man?
Big Papa.
Yes. Oh,
But I'm a big girl now.
you're a big girl now?
You.
I don't know.
Oh, my goodness. You did that?
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. Let me see if you can do the other one.
This is what this book is about. It's learning to whistle in various ways. As a culture, we find it very important for the children to
So like a morning dove.
expose as much as possible to the elder population.
Like this.
I'm inspired to create from the gifts of Mother Earth. I feel as though that I have the gift to create as it speaks to me. The creation of my Lenape art is from the heart and the mindset that forms from deep within. I feel that the indigenous people of New Jersey are often portrayed as something that is from the past, when in fact we are alive and thriving, and there are many artists among our tribe that are underrepresented or never mentioned. This is just a sample picture of some of the art that I'm going to show you today. Our community, the Nanticoke Lenni Lenape, are unique. We have the honor to be immersed not just in culture, however, we are surrounded by many generations. It is no mistake that our ancient art forms have been passed down generationally. I personally have had the honor to learn about many art forms from several elder members. This is of the 2019 powwow with 4 of my 5 children with my father. This picture was taken last month, gathering the vegetation to make some of the dyes for this presentation. My granddaughters were very engaged in what we were doing and interested in picking the vegetation for this presentation. And this experience reminded me of my grandmother, Marion Strong Medicine Gould. There's a book written by Amy Hill Harth called Strong Medicine Speaks, but this reminded me of visiting her, and she would take me around the yard and we would find different herbs for healing or medications, or she would teach me what was edible and what was not. So this experience was generational because it made me the embodiment of her with my grandchildren. Lenape arts have been created for thousands of years. They are rooted in tradition, but also inspired by individual imagination and skill. Art created from nature evolved with the advancements of technology and changes of culture. However, creations have remained an individual process. Each created artwork speaks and communicates to the heart of the creator. This is a dance fan that was made in 1998 with, I call it my new regalia because I still wear it, but this is made with brain tanned doe skin, clay beads, beans, shells, wampum beads, and of course a turkey tail. And I use this for dancing. This is my dance fan, which is traditional. This is a scallop shell necklace made with beans, clay beads that I made, shells, and also with the same leather. And there's a few beads of in the top that you can barely see, but you can see the wampum beads at the top. But this is a scallop shell that I gathered from Port Norris shell pile, which is about 16 miles south of where I live now. And I would go get the shells and create whatever I could. This is another scallop shell piece that I made. This is a hair piece made with the same materials, a scallop shell, clay beads that I made, beans and shells and leather. And I really enjoy making things from nature and recreating what God has given to us. The Creator has given us so many things that we can create and we can reproduce from creation without having machine-made items. This is a very old dream catcher. I made this in 1985, and I gathered the grapevine myself, and I, connected it with a piece of leather and a turkey feather. And it's very difficult to see the pattern because it's not a perfect circle as the dream catchers are today, but it has the pattern of a rose. If you look closely, you can see the rose petals around each section. And it's still intact. It's behind me on my table, and it's very old. This is a medicine pouch. I have herbs in here. I have a blend of tea that I created made with sage, rosemary, mint, and chickweed. And I carry the dried leaves in all my pouches. And this is a pouch it's embellished with seed beads, and it's made with a very soft leather. This is another scallop shell necklace that I made. And this time I etched with sand and a reed. I etched through the outer shell so that you could see the white underneath, and embellished it with leather. This is a wampum bead belt, or a replica of what would be a wampum bead belt. And these are glass wampum beads. But this is exactly how the wampum is made. It's made with strips of leather, sinew, and the wampum beads. And you can make them as large or as small as you want, but this is a wampum bead belt. This is a turtle shell pouch. And this turtle shell pouch is made with turtle shell that I traded. It's from the southeastern parts of the United States. It's not a turtle that's from here, but we get these from, it's called a barber's map turtle. And at the powwow each year, I frequent the vendors that have natural items to purchase. And this is one of the turtle shells that I purchased from them. And I made a pouch with a button made from the deer antler and leather. And this is the eastern mud turtle. Actually, this turtle is indigenous to right here in this area. This is another turtle shell pouch that I wear and that I made. And these are one-piece turtle shells. So I would just make a pouch and put it inside the turtle shell and attach it with leather. This is a scallop shell pouch, and it's actually 2 scallop shells that are attached with leather around the outer edge so that it opens and closes. And this piece I also made in 1998 that I wear with my new regalia. Each year I add a new piece to my regalia, but these were the initial pieces. This is also decorated with the same stitch, the same clay beads, beans, shells, wampum shells, and brain tanned doe skin. And I'm sure you'll have questions on what that is later. This is a beaded belt that I made in 1995 for a previous dress, a cloth dress, trade cloth dress, but I also wear it with my leather dress. This beaded belt actually took nearly a year to finish with trade beads. And trade beads or go back as far as the 15th and 16th century that we adopted trade beads. And this is from 1995 also that I wore with my cloth dress, and I also wear with my leather dress. But this is with the same trade beads. This is the rosette stitch, which is made with 3 beads at a time. And it's a pouch, if I didn't mention that, it's a pouch. It's a very large pouch so that I can carry more than just herbs. I carry my keys and my cell phone, my glasses, all my modern day things. Understanding the gifts of the Creator and what has been afforded and available to us is one with nature. I feel as though that I have the gift to create as it speaks to me. If someone asks for something to be made, this may even take more time. The person who is asking must be considered. The creation takes on the form that represents the asking and me together, both as one with nature. My creations take time, and it takes thought, and it takes meditation, and it takes a purpose as to why the inspiration has become the creation. This picture is of my granddaughters and I for this presentation peeling onion skins to make some of the dyes for the later part of this webinar. And if there's any questions, this is the time to ask. If you have anything that you would like to know.
We have one question that
Sure.
came in the chat.
Okay.
What are the ages of the book series aimed towards?
Oh, I would say all ages because all of my books have a meaning to the story. I'm a firm believer that every story must have a reason and a lesson. So my daughter reads them to my grandchildren, and they're 3 and 5. And one of the last books that I wrote may be a little harder to understand, but my 5-year-old gets the concept because she realizes that the little boy is angry in the beginning and that he becomes very happy in the end. So I would say any age would probably enjoy the stories because they are ancient Lenape type stories that I created.
Well, there are several more questions that just came in. The first one for the turtle shells. Are they usually wild caught or found objects? Are the turtles wild caught eaten? And the second part of this question is, you mentioned glass wampum. Is any from the actual shells?
Personally, I do have a piece that's made with real wampum shells, but wampum shells are extremely difficult to create. The wampum beads are very difficult to create. There's only a few artists left that really do a lot of the wampum shell beads. So no, I do not have very much made with a wampum shell. And as far as the turtles, I would only use anything that I find that's already deceased. I never believe in, using something that's alive. And I do know that our tribe traditionally, and my dad can also answer some of this, but some of our earlier gatherings, we had people that would catch snapper turtle and make snapper turtle soup. But as far as the Eastern mud turtle, we just find them empty shells, clean them up and use them that way.
All right. Another question is, do you make items to sell?
It's very difficult for me to make items to sell. And it's because I cannot reproduce anything. So I will make items as gifts. I will make items for special occasions. But to make items to sell, then it no longer becomes special. So to me, and that's just my opinion. So to make items to sell is not really what I do. I don't think that I've ever sold anything. As a matter of fact, the one of the gourd pieces that you'll see on the stand, or I think it was in the advertisement also, someone offered quite a bit of money for that. And but it's a story that I made that with from, so I wouldn't sell it. There was no money that would, be worth selling.
All right. Well, unless we encourage you to create a few things for us.
Well, then I would do that.
we will try.
Yes, you would try.
Yes. Well, another one from our guests would like to know, when were trade beads developed into use?
That's very difficult. I know some of the pieces date back to the 15th and 16th century, when the first European incursion, prior to that. And I think it was a little later here on the East Coast that we developed, because we had porcupine quill work that we did here. And we had other items that we use, wampum shells. But the trade beads, the beadwork, I'm going to say the popularity was probably in the late 1700s through the 1800s.
I see. Another question is, were all of your creations made using traditional materials such as pine needles and thread, or did you have to compromise with modern supplies?
Well, that's a good question. I don't consider it compromise. I consider it an evolution to be able to use supplies. So no, all my items are not made with just the traditional way. I make things with what I have. So like, let's say, for instance, the sinew. The sinew is the fibrous substance that you find when you pull the hide off the animal. And there's a wide fibrous substance that you would have to peel, soak, and split. And to make the pieces that I make, and to do that process, I'd probably make one piece a year. So of course I'm going to go buy the simulated sinew to make my baskets and anything else. But I feel, though, like I said in that one slide, it doesn't take away from my creativity and my art and who I am to be able to use the new materials, just like we adopted beadwork back in the 17th and 18th century. Yeah. So we evolved with the times.
Yes. Well, another question is, will you be writing more children books?
Yes. As a matter of fact, my illustrator's waiting for my next one that I'm supposed to have to him the second week in November. And then as soon as he's done, then I'll have it published. But I have a couple more books written already.
All right. What materials do you use for sewing is another question.
I use the simulated sinew. There are many types. I like the waxed corded wide sinew because it gives a more authentic look to my art. But there's also the corded sinew, which is easier to use, and you don't have to split the sinew into two different pieces, or however thin or thick you would like it. But if you're talking about my sewing of my pine needle baskets, that's what I use.
All right. Another question is, where did you learn to sew and bead?
Oh, that's a good question. For sewing, for material sewing, I learned from my grandmother, strong medicine. That's for clothing. For sewing pine needle baskets, I learned from Dawn Manyfeathers and Margaret Miller, which are my cousins and generation older than me. And I learned that, I think it was about the age of 11. And beadwork, I learned from, we lived in Maryland as a child in the early 70s. I did my first bead piece with the Piscataway canoes, and I was 8 years old.
I see. And the same guest would like to know what are your favorite materials to work with or your favorite creation?
That's a loaded question because I really don't have any favorites. A lot of times things will come to me in the middle of the night and I want to create it. So if any of you follow any of my websites or my YouTube channels, you'll see that I'm into so much that I there's just not enough time in the day and not enough weeks in the year to learn as much as I want to learn. I do everything from, you know, alpacas. We have alpacas, and I, you know, hand cart that and spin it. And, you know, there's so much that I do that there is no favorite. I just want to learn as much as I can and be creative.
Yeah. Well, I also wanted to ask one last more general question this time that would be for both of you. Because you mentioned the powwow in the beginning of your presentation, and some people have attended powwows and some perhaps haven't, but can you elaborate a little bit on what is the role of the powwow in preserving or changing Native American traditions and traditional arts?
Who did you want to go first, myself or my dad?
Or whatever you prefer. I mean, if go first and then Mark.
Okay. I can't explain it. The powwow is very similar to this live meeting, that I can feel the energy, even though that I know that you're not in the room with me. I can feel the energy. And what I mean is that when we know the powwow is coming, the energy of the excitement to be together with those that you don't see on an everyday basis, because a powwow brings us all together from all across the country. And the powwow is a huge family gathering where we all get together. And we've had family gatherings since before recorded history. And the gatherings, you know, were all summer long, all year long. But the powwow is a gathering that's extended further, and it's more to invite others from other tribes. It's evolved to a huge family gathering where now the powwow has its own traditions that are rooted in a lot of different tribal cultures. There are sometimes up to 10 drum groups from all across the country that come with their different drum styles and their art. There's different dance categories that, you know, even though there's a dance category, the regalia, that regalia means clothing, by the way, the regalia that everybody wears, maybe the shawl regalia, each one is still created so uniquely different that the regalia itself is art. The powwow has helped us maintain our culture as a celebration and to share with others, to share with non-native people, to commune with them, and to celebrate and to show that we still celebrate, and that we celebrate family, and we celebrate generations, and we celebrate culture.
Yeah, well, you invite many tribes to come to your powwow, but also everyone else who wants to attend.
Yes.
So, Mark, do you think that the powwow has helped to preserve some of the art forms, or how has this changed over time? What do you think?
Well, the powwow gives us an opportunity to exchange political views But that's not what the powwow in our community is really about. Before the powwows that were brought back into our community, we had 3 communities that had social gatherings. And it gave us a time where we could bring hundreds of people. And then, as my father would say, that's where you meet your wife. And see, all this, or there's 3 communities, 2 in Delaware and 1 here, where just to show you, my father was taking on a horse trip to Delaware, and he asked his father, he says, why are we going, because we're going so long and it takes 2 weeks. And he says, so you can meet your wife. See, so a lot of the traditions aren't, that they're not passed down with meaning, but they do have a meaning. So when that's how I met Tyrese's mother at one of those gatherings. And when the powwow came up, all the young bucks got out and danced so that they could be seen. The women got out and strutted. I mean, they were so proper so that the guys know what they were getting into. And sometimes you get fooled. And like I said, I'm very polite because my mother was strong, my wife is strong, my daughters are strong, and that's what the powwow is about to me. Very spiritual, very rule oriented, and but like I said, you get a chance to put on your best bib and tucker and go out and dance for the girls. Hey, there you are.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. I would suggest that we continue with the presentation of Tyrese a bit,
Okay.
and then we can take more questions.
All right. So this is the introduction to the infinity spiral pine needle art. And the reason why I call it infinity spiral is it's a spiritual thing. It continues. It continues in a sequence where it gets larger, and it continues because you have to add more. And you can make it as large as you want, but it can continue until you end it. So that's why I call it the infinity spiral. The infinity spiral that I make are made from the longleaf pine tree. A full-grown tree has between 8 and 18-inch long needles that turn golden in color. And the longleaf pine forest once encompassed more than 90 million acres of the North American landscape. Today, only 3% or 3.4 million acres remain. And yet the longleaf pine forest represents some of the world's most biologically diverse ecosystems. And this is a picture of one of the longleaf pine needle trees that's on our tribal property in Fairfield Township. The longleaf pine ecosystem provides a critical habitat for more than 29 threatened and endangered species. And those threatened and endangered species include the gopher tortoise and the indigo snake. And longleaf pine preservation is crucial, not just for the ecosystem, however, to maintain our ancient Lenape culture. And this is what it looks like when we gather the pine needles at the bottom of the tree. And the importance of us gathering our own pine needles from our own tribal property is that we lived here for thousands of years, and our ancestors are a part of the soil that these pine trees grow from. And these pine trees and these pine needles carry the DNA of our ancestors, which is crucial to be able to feel one with nature and one with those that walked on this land before us. And our tribe, the Nanticoke Lenape here in Bridgeton, New Jersey, has made a conscientious effort to protect the longleaf pine and its habitat on our tribal property. Tribal members have access to the needles for the ancient art form creations. And I'm going to introduce you today to how to create that infinity spiral pine needle art. This is a picture of something that I created in 1995. Preparing the materials. Step 1, you soak the pine needles for 2 or more hours until they're soft and unbreakable when bending. And this doesn't matter. They could be 100-year-old pine needles. As long as you soak them, you can still use them. You measure arm's length of sinew, you double it, cut it, and then split the sinew in half, but only the wide type that I was speaking about. The regular type of sinew, you don't need to split. And then you snap the wooded end from 6 pine needles. You make a loop in the sinew with a 1/2 inch tail. Place that loop a 1/2 inch high on the end of the pine needles and you hold it. You wrap the end of the pine needles all the way to the end. You insert the needle in the loop on the other end and you pull the tail to secure the sinew. This is so that you don't have to create any knots. So this is demonstrating, this is what the store-bought sinew looks like. And these are soaked pine needles. Soaked pine needles are very soft and pliable. This is what I mean by split the sinew in half. Now you can, or I'm sorry, I'm gonna measure an arm length from the fingertips to the elbow, double it, and then cut it. Now you can use this sinew whole, or you can split it in half, which I like to do for the small intricate work, such as the pine needle baskets. And this simulated sinew really does act similar to what is the real sinew, which is that fibrous substance on the back of the hide after you tan the animal, after you peel the hide from the animal. This is what I meant by snapping the wooded ends off of the pine needles. These pine needles, the Eastern pine that we use, have 3 pine needles per bundle. So you take 6 bundles. You can actually take as many as you want, but I like 6 bundles for this project. I made a loop. I'm going to show you the loop. And then I wrap it all the way to the end. And there's the loop. I stick the needle in that loop and then I pull. This is a time progressed video, so you're not going to see every step, but you get the idea. And when we use pine needles, it's very important to remember that this is a gift from the Creator that we can make something with. And it is, like I said before, extra special because these pine needles came from our ancestral land here in Fairfield Township. So they are a part of my ancestors, that their bones are in the soil, and you know, the rain has circulated through that soil and the tree has used that nutrient to grow these needles so that I can create the art that I do. And it's very satisfying to work with the pine needles because your mind is concentrating on what you're doing. However, you're concentrating on what it's going to be and where it came from. I hope that's not too deep. It's just very satisfying to be able to create from something that is from my history and my past, not just learning the artwork itself, but using the materials that are from my ancestral land. Trim the bottom of the sinew and the pine needle and make sure it's even. Wrap the pine needles around the center, and this is called coiling. And then sew the needles down and continue to coil as you sew, placing the stitch next to the previous row. Here's another video that's going to show it's a little more progressing in this one. So we started the middle. Now we just on the subsequent rows, the coiling it's called, the infinity spiral. We add more needles as needed to continue. And you can make, like I said, you can make this as large as you like, and it can continue. And it's just like our people. As long as you gather and sow, then we will continue. As long as we teach these ancient art forms, like this infinity spiral, then it will continue. It will be an infinity. As long as I teach my children, as long as I teach my grandchildren, then it's infinity. As long as we're able to use the materials from our ancient land, then it's infinity. And in the beginning, you have to add about 3 bundles, because what that does is that it starts to get smaller, but you don't want to add all of your pine needles at the same time, because you want the basket to be strong, so you have to stagger it. So I do 3 or 4 stitches and then add 1 small bundle, and that way it's always strong. It's always strong. Just like you know, we all don't have children at the same time. We all have children at a different time, and our tribe remains strong. This is infinity. This is creation of our ancient art form, but it's also metaphorically that how we remain as a people and as a tribe. That's just showing you to stack the rows after you're coiling. When you get it a certain size, and you want to start sewing on top of the basket itself. After the bottom is a desired size, you hold the coil on top of the row and you sew vertically until you get to a desired height. And then after the side is a desired size, you start coiling facing inward towards the center. When the infinity spiral is a desired size, you finish by not adding any more pine needles and you sew it down as usual. So these are some tips. Add pine needles every 3rd or 4th stitch and replace the sinew with a square knot and sew the knot in the pine needles before trimming it off. Pull the sinew the opposite direction to lock the stitch and hold the infinity spiral firmly to pull each stitch tight. And when closing it off, sew as usual and sew the sinew into a few stitches inside the infinity spiral before snipping it off, and then shape it and let it dry. And this is building the rows, and basically you're sewing the same, you're doing the same stitch, but you're holding it on top of the previous stitch. And you can see this was the next day. It does take some time, but this was the next day, and it started to dry on the inside already, where it turns into a golden color. You cannot use the pine needles when they're dry because they'll be brittle and break. So they have to soak for several hours so they're pliable. But they're preserved and they can be used for many years. And this is what I meant by you put a knot and then you sew inside the basket or the spiral before you trim the knot, and you make another knot just in case that knot comes untied. Then your basket won't fall apart or your artwork won't fall apart. So I just, take the sinew and I insert it in a few stitches. Then make another knot and then trim it off. This is how far down I'll make the knot and then trim it. Then after knotting it off, I like to shape it, because once it's dry, it's gonna maintain that shape. So I'll shape it, and it does shrink a little. That's why it's good to keep the stitches as tight as possible. And if you have any pine needles that are sticking out, you can push them back in, or you can even trim the sharp pine needles, and so they don't stick you when it's dry. And you have a finished product, finished art. And you can embellish these. You can put stones. You can sew stones inside. You can decorate the outside. This is a hair piece that was created in 1995. It's a similar stitch, but it's a split stitch, meaning that I put the needle in the previous stitch instead of next to the previous stitch. It's embellished with shells and leather. And you can see this is, I still wear this today. This is done in 1995. That's what I say. We always add to our regalia. We never replace, but we always add to what we wear. This basket was created in 2008 with a split stitch, and it's embellished with shell, bone beads, brass beads, and a feather. And those are typical trade beads. By the way, the brass beads that are very ancient, hundreds of years old, that were some of the trade beads that came to America. And this was created in 2016 with a wrap stitch, and pine needles can be used to embellish other artwork, which you see here. This is a gourd that I created, that I grew and created. And I embellished with the pine needles, and this time I didn't snap the wooded ends off. That's a close-up of what the pine needle basket looks like. And a lid. So are there any questions? I saw someone raise their hand.
Actually, there are questions. And
okay. All right. Now's the time to ask.
Let's take some time to answer a few questions now, and we can continue with the questions at the end of your presentation. But
yes,
some of them are seem to be related to the first part of your presentation.
That's fine.
But yeah, I believe it is. So what are the wampum beads and what is their significance? They seem to often be used in decoration. Is there a story behind them?
Yes, they are the first trade beads. And just like anything else, the more integral or the harder the object, the more value that it holds. And they're made from the quahog clamshell, which is the clamshell that's purple and white. And they actually are tubular and have a hole. So I cannot imagine really how they did it without the machines that we have nowadays. So they hold a lot of value because it's like mining gold or diamonds. There's only a few diamond mines. There's only a few diamonds. Well, there's only a few of these types of trade beads. So that's why it was treated as currency or, to trade for other items. And the significance of them is that they're just very beautiful and hard to do.
Yeah, and maybe because they're used to create images on the
Yes,
belts
yes, they
and
did.
tell stories.
And they did. The belts, some of the belts told stories of gatherings, European incursions, the history. Correct.
Well, another one of the guests is asking, how did your ancestors acquire glass beads so many years ago?
I really cannot answer that. I know that how we acquire trade beads now is through the powwows and the gatherings. So I can only imagine that, just like any other place, there were travelers that came with treasures from around the world and traded for whatever we had. Maybe we had pelts and, leather that we traded for vessels and tools.
Yeah, could be. So there is another question that is related to the COVID-19 situation. How has COVID-19 impacted the cultural transmissions to the younger generations? Could you still have the powwow or other gatherings?
Actually, no, everything was shut down for the tribe as well. And we take it serious. No one wants to be sick. We have to protect our elders and our youth, as well as ourselves. So we did not have the powwow. This is the first time we did not have the powwow since 1978. But we had a virtual powwow like everybody else. We had everybody posted their pictures. There are virtual powwow pages. Everybody's sharing their new art forms and their new regalias, and many videos with people sharing their dancing. So just like the rest of the world, we went virtual with our powwows, and you can find many channels with our powwow culture, just as we're doing here. And one of the things that we did find is that now it opens the door for the natives of Canada and South America flute players. So now it's a virtual powwow that's really worldwide.
Yeah, same thing. We all live in the Zoom world, but we can meet people from far away this way,
Yes.
more often. Yes. Another question is, were there Lenape people living in Delaware? This is a guest who signed in from Wilmington, Delaware, and wants to know.
Yes. Okay. So I try to teach this. The word Lenape means original people. So when the first Europeans came, the Lenape were a language-based Algonquin speaking, which was one of the largest one language-based people. And the Lenape, if you use the word Lenape, you're just saying original people. So it's more of a descriptive term. So when the first Europeans incurred us here, Verrazano was one of the first ones that incurred our Delaware people here, which is another descriptive term. They used Lenape in our own language to describe us, meaning original people. However, we had other descriptive terms that described us, like Cohensic, Unilactico, which just means a descriptive term meaning dwellers by the sea. There's Nanticoke. So when they say Lenape, you're just describing a term of original people.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, Tyrese, I just wanted to tell you that people are sharing so many kind words. You cannot follow the chat, but
I can't see anything.
words of appreciation and thank you for keeping your traditions alive. And so some were interested in your books, and Marcy shared the links so they can find it online. Some say that they want to take a class.
Okay.
So there are a few more questions. What is the biggest piece you've ever made with pine needles?
I'm going to say that basket from 2008 is the biggest piece that I've made with pine needles. If I make something too big with just pine needles, it loses its shape and becomes weak. So I'm going to say that piece that piece has a story behind it. My mother asked me to make that for her, and I made that for her, and she passed away in 2015. And her husband, Ralph Carter, Standing Bear, he passed away in 2011. So I had to go and pack up all her things, and that was on her fireplace mantle. So it has sentimental value to me because I created that for her with her in mind, and she loved it. And then it ended up back with me. So that's the largest pine needle. Now I embellish things with pine needles. Some of the gourd art that I did could be very large. And then I can, it's made, pine needles are made for smaller items, smaller. You can't do too big of things with pine needles.
All right. So how long could a simple basket take to make? It's,
Well, when I did the Wheaton Arts, the thing, that's when I timed how long that took. That took probably, I want to say about 30 hours because I had the video, for the Wheaton Arts education class that we did. And I think it was about 30 hours because I had to soak the pine needles. And when you're snapping the pine needle ends off, your fingers can become quite irritated and raw. So you have to give yourself a break. So I'm going to say about 30 hours.
yeah, but that's from the very beginning to the end. But
Yes.
if you already have the pine needles prepared, it will be significantly less. Just to make it with ready prepared materials, right?
Yeah. It's not as quick as you think. That video actually was 2 days of video. So it was many hours just to do the base. And it was, speeded up. I really don't know.
Well,
Yeah, I really don't know.
I just added this because I remember we had a workshop years ago in pine needle basket making with Don Many Feathers, and
Mhm.
people who attended the class, in 2 hours, they're able to be almost there. I mean, not quite finished, but almost there. And of course, she brought everything ready to go.
You got everything ready, correct?
And there are a couple more questions.
Sure.
You use traditional Nanticoke materials, but have you or other Nanticoke borrowed from other native peoples' traditions or from traditions from other peoples?
Of
Those
course.
spirals remind me of South Carolina African American / African descended people's sweetgrass baskets. So this is a question. It's whether you borrow from someone else or if you can just make some comparisons between Lenape baskets and other tribal traditions in terms of materials or design or meanings.
Well, I think that we have to put it in context that a lot of the stuff that you'll see in other states and so forth, especially from other cultures, especially the sweetgrass, was borrowed from the indigenous people and adopted into other cultures. And the only reason why we cannot own anything is because there's pine needle trees in the whole earth. There's sweetgrass on the whole East Coast. So to claim that we own anything would be incorrect. no one knows exactly the origin of anything. However, we all keep our own style and we all have our own way of doing things, which can be, and that could be the difference. And sweetgrass baskets goes way back to even in this area. Sweetgrass baskets were in some of our ancient history, that when the first Europeans incurred us here, the Delaware, there were our people that made baskets, especially out of sweetgrass and pine needles. So it's hard to say who adopted what, but there are differences in everybody's culture and how that's done. No one can own anything.
Yeah, so the differences would be mostly in design, not so much materials, and materials would be dependent on what region you live
What
in.
region you're from, correct.
All right. I think we can take one last question at this time, and you can continue. If we wanted to make a basket, would you be able to help provide us with long pine needles?
I know you can purchase the long pine needles on Amazon.
Oh, really?
Yes, yes. And that's what I was saying. No one can own any particular art form. It's what's available. It's just like the seed beads were created by China, and they were adopted in Europe, and then they were brought to America.
Yeah.
And it's the same with our globalization now. We have Amazon, and you can find almost anything on Amazon, or I would say your local craft stores, but they're closed, a lot of them, and it's limited supply. But yes, you can find pine needles on Amazon. You can buy them by the box.
I see. Well, I just wanted to help with this answer.
Yes.
In a post-COVID world, if we are to offer a class on our campus for pine needle baskets, we'll make sure that the materials are provided.
Yes.
So
Can I
let
say one
us.
thing? Can I say one thing about this? What we're talking about art. These products were necessities. That they weren't art in our ancestors' culture. They were things that they needed, and they took pride in what they made, so they made it beautiful. But if you look at it a year after they made it, then it was well used. So what we're looking at now is something that are recreations of what our ancestors had for everyday use.
Yes. Yep. And we as Lenape have a knack for making things beautiful and finding usefulness of whatever grows from nature, whatever we can find from deceased animals, whatever grows. And we have the ability to be artistic and create something. And everything, and my dad is right, everything that we do has its own individual spirit, has its own individual art form at the same time of being useful.
Yes, and one of the guests is saying that it reminds me of the Fibonacci sequence.
It does, and that's exactly what the Fibonacci sequence is, and it's infinity, correct?
Yes.
A very wise guest there.
All right, I suggest that we continue now with the other part of your presentation. We'll take more questions at the end.
Okay. Well, this is going to be about the Gourd Art, the no-face Gourd Art. And the main gourd, the native to North America, is a Cucurbita species, including the squash. And one of the earliest domesticated types is the bottle gourd, and has been discovered in archaeological sites dating back to 13,000 BCE. I find that amazing, by the way. Gourds may be the earliest plant domesticated by man, and many crops include pumpkins, cucumbers, squash, loofah, and melons. And this picture is of my workshop / store where I, sell my gourds and my gourd art, my oil and my tea. These are some of the gourds that that grew over the years, and that's what they look like before you clean them. The word gourd simply means the fruit of the plant in our North American species. A gourd is the hollow and a dried shell of a vine fruit. Its hard shell gourds can last forever and become as soft wood. Gourds were used throughout the years as dolls, tools, musical instruments, art, food, utensils, boat floats, masks, jewelry, spiritual uses, containers, and more. This is a picture of my gourd garden showing what's growing this year and what grew last year. I have created a gourd garden that maximizes the space to grow as many gourds on a small footprint. I raise the gourds on a hanging hoop house that allows the vines to climb as high as possible, and the fruit can hang until it dries enough to be stored. And now I'm going to introduce how to create the No Face Ancestor Gourd Art. This is a video of this year's gourd garden that I did, and you'll see this year I did something different because I was fighting with the moles. I started the gourds in little pots in the greenhouse. We covered the greenhouse, and then I planted them a little larger, and I did not have to fight with the animals that tried to take the gourds, the plants. This is a progression. Every week I took pictures as a part of my art. This gourd greenhouse is one of my arts. I also planted pinto in case anybody recognizes that. Now in this, if you can look really closely, I put lights in my gourd greenhouse. So at night when we're outside at the bonfire, it's very beautiful. It's angelic. So in order to make the No Face Ancestor dolls, you choose a gourd that's older than 2 years old until you could be sure that it's fully dried. You clean and scrape the mold and the spots or from the surface of the gourd with a stone. And I didn't put it in here, but I soak the gourd for many hours before I do that. And then you cut the bottom of the gourd and remove the seeds, and you store the seeds for planting next season. That's the ancestral part of this. These seeds from these gourds are continuous seeds from the previous year's gourds, and it continues. And I don't even know how old my seeds are, but as I mentioned earlier, the gourd dates back to 13,000 BCE that we know of, even further. And those are the species of gourds that we have. So that's the ancestral part, one of the ancestral parts. Planting the seed in our soil of my ancestors, knowing that my ancestors touched this soil, is also the ancestor that grows these gourds. And this is a short video of how I prepare the gourds. Just gather a few of stones. I'm only going to use them once. And this is if we were not to use modern day tools. I do use modern day tools, but this is the old way, which is simply scraping the mold after it's soaked and smoothing it. And, you know, as I hold this gourd in my hand, I consider, what is this going to be? What is this going to look like? How am I going to create something? What is it going to be? Is it going to be a vessel? Is it going to tell a story? Is it going to be a no-face ancestor? And when you hold it in your hand and you work with it without man-made tools, it speaks to you with its perfect imperfections, and it tells you what it wants to be. It's very satisfying as well. And for demonstration purposes, I used a bone knife to cut through the wood exterior on the bottom. Now I use a Dremel, but this is for demonstration purposes to show that, you know, the Gourd Art it can be very satisfying, and it can be done with anything. And I also wanted to show a usefulness of the basket. And I decided to wear a medicine pouch that day. I wear them often. So before I decided to cut the bottom, I thought about, okay, well, I'm going to make a no face ancestor doll out of this one instead of a vessel. So, which is why I'm cutting the bottom to remove the seeds. If I wanted to make it into something else, I would cut a hole in the side or at the top. I can make a canteen by cutting the top off and using the top as a stopper. But this one said it wanted to be a no-face ancestor. So I cut the bottom to remove the seeds. And once we get through the hard wood exterior, it becomes very easy to remove. And it's over 2 years old, so you can see that the seeds are already dried, and it's very easy to clean out. And just took a rock and smoothed the edges. And I just polished any other spots that didn't come off with a piece of leather. Now, to prepare to make the dyes and polish, I gathered plants and vegetation to prepare the dyes, and I boiled each plant and let it sit for several hours to extract the color. And to prepare the wax, I did a vegetable oil and beeswax mixture for polishing the gourd. Nowadays, we can use shellac, but you'll see the difference in the end when I show you between the shellacked or the painted versus the polished gourds. This video is my granddaughters and I gathering the vegetation to make the dyes from our yard. What we're going to do is we're going to pick those yellow flowers, and I'm going to boil them. It's going to make yellow dye, okay? You can see the gourds are already starting to, the vines are starting to dry. I let them dry, I let the gourds dry on the greenhouse as long as possible before taking them and hanging them up to dry. Push it, put it in your basket. Okay.
This is fun.
Uh-huh. Okay. All right, so that's all we're going to use for the yellow. We're going to go get some green color. This was just done in October just for this presentation. This one makes a really pretty color green. This one. You can pick it and then rub the leaves. Pick the whole plant. You gotta pick the whole plant. We're gonna go find more. Okay, put it in your basket.
Bye-bye.
Here's more mint right here. This is more mint, this one, with the ruffled leaves. So go ahead and pick a whole plant like this and put it in your baskets. Doesn't that smell good? That's what we make the mint tea with also. There's more, Tally. There's some more here. There you go. Has to smell like the mint. See some more mint right here. Okay.
Is that enough?
That is enough mint. Okay. And these are hibiscus. Hibiscus make the pink. And the famous pokeberry, everybody's afraid of the pokeberry, but the pokeberry makes a beautiful fuchsia, sometimes up to purple. I also have a black walnut tree, but I couldn't find any black walnuts. My granddaughters and I peeling onion skins to make orange.
You dropped yours. Onions are my favorite to eat.
Really?
Onions are not my favorite.
They're not your favorite? You're really gonna take the dried parts off.
Yes.
Okay.
It's hard working with one hand, huh, Talia?
So we use hibiscus for red or pink, onion skin for brown or orange, mint for green, and marigold for yellow for this demonstration. And I just boil them. What's not going to be shown in this is I had to boil them, let them soak for many hours, and then crush them to make the dyes. And how I make the polish is you can use a double boil pot, but I used a small bowl within a pot. I added 1 cup of olive oil and I heated it, and then added 1 cup of beeswax and melted the beeswax. And I poured solution, the beeswax oil solution, into a container and set it in ice water to cure. And this video, this is just showing, if I get any excuse to be outside, that's where I am. So for this demonstration purposes, I boiled the dyes outside. And I love to have fire, and the trees that I burn are from my yard, which again goes back to the smoke is from my ancestors. And these trees are the same, from the same soil that our people have been from for thousands of years. So this cleansing smoke from these cedar trees are spiritual to me. This is the hibiscus. After the hibiscus, it's always good to cook the onion skins outside anyway. Onion skins, the aroma is pretty strong from the onion skin. You just let it boil for several minutes, up to an hour, until the onion skins become very soft and it extracts the color. we tend to forget that the dyes for the old dyes for some of our objects actually come from vegetation instead of artificial. We tend to forget that we colored our porcupine quills and our leather and so forth from vegetation. So when we're creating the No Face Ancestor gourd, we use a sponge. We lightly coat the entire gourd with a dye from the onion skins for a light brown color. And then the dress, we use multicolored dyes. For modern colors, after I use the vegetation dyes, I use alcohol ink, and it gives a vibrant color. It's just like the trade beads. I adopted alcohol ink. And then I coat it with oil and wax mixture for protection and shine, which gives it a little different shine than using a gloss paint. This is just a demonstration of, and then I used, just for demonstration purposes, some of the scallop shell pouches for the dyes. And then I turned to the alcohol inks to bring out more color. This is a time-lapse video. And then, of course, I use acrylic paint to decorate it. And I apologize for not getting in the camera. I wasn't aware until it was done, but there was no way I could create it again. And you can see the inks are drying in the gourd. So by the time I was done painting with acrylics to decorate it, I was able to use the beeswax oil to shine it, and just take note of how dull it looks. So you notice how dull it looks, and then what the and it's like a wood substance. So of course wood does well with oil and beeswax, just like any other polish, and it also preserves it, and it brings out the color. And I just measured out a piece of leather so that for this demonstration purposes, I could show you, how I embellish it to give it a little individuality. And later I will put beads and, figure out how else I want to make this more individual. And you can notice how shiny it is. And the blue dots on that were not done on purpose. It was done by accident. And I'll explain when we get to that picture how I feel about something when that happens. This picture represents generations of my ancestors. The finished No Face Ancestor was created in 2016 from ancestor seeds. The gourd was actually grown in 2012. The raw gourd was grown in 2017 from ancestor seeds. The cleaned gourd was grown in 2015 and is now ready to be used or created into something. And finally, there are new gourds growing in 2020. Gourds, like I said before, must dry for at least 2 years before they can be made into art. So it is a long process. The Lenape never put faces on any objects for fear that the spirit may overtake the object. This is why I call it No Face Ancestor. I call it No Face Ancestor because I'm using ancestral seeds that are planted in my ancestral land. So it's very spiritual. This is a front view of one of the dolls that I created. This is a side view. And I did use simulated hair in this one and embellished it with leather and sewed my favorite flower, which is the wild tiger lily, on the dress. So this is actually my tiger lily No Face Ancestor. This one I used a wood burner to make the triangles, and then I painted it with the inks in each triangle and embellished it with leather. I did a side twist, which is a rope twist, and some beads. This is a side view. And I also put a headband with a feather. I gave it a fancier hairdo around the face. This is the back view. Gourds are so versatile that many objects can be made from them, including hair and clothing ornaments. These are some of the gourds that I grew a couple of years ago, but I wanted to show you the variety. And if you look at it, you can create many different kinds of art. You can create vessels, spoons, if you cut it in half, canteens. But this is a picture to show you the different types and different shapes. They come in so many different shapes, bottle gourds. They call these birdhouse gourds, spoons. There's hundreds of different types of gourds. And gourds can represent a story. This gourd set that I created was made in honor of the new water bearer age and the return of the dwarf planet that makes an appearance during the harvest moon. I created the stand from a cedar tree in my yard that my husband cut in small pieces so that I could use to display my gourds. But this gourd is also embellished with pine needles, and I did not take the wooded ends off, and I used a metal formation with beads. This actually represents the new age of Aquarius and nebula that's bringing a message of peace and prosperity in a medicine pouch of healing. And the pouch on the dwarf gourd, or the dwarf planet, the nebula, actually has my herbs, my healing herbs, my tea that I sell. And this represents that age, which is very spiritual to me, which means a lot to me with the new age that's coming, the water bearer age. This is a close-up of the same, and I embellished, you can see I embellished it with beads. I did the wrap stitch, and I also do wire art, and that represents the universe, and it represents equality and balance with the balance beads of from red to indigo, and a turquoise stone for peace and prosperity. And this is a close-up of the dwarf with the medicine pouch bringing a message of peace and prosperity with the herbs inside the pouch. So gourds can tell a story, or the art can tell a story. This was made, this is the piece that someone offered a lot of money for, but to me, it just cannot be sold unless Yvette forces me to make them for WheatonArts. This is another No Face Ancestor. I love this piece because it wasn't until I stained it that the perfect imperfections showed on the face. And Lenape believed that only God or only the creator can be perfect. When we were younger and we would do beadwork, there was always a mistake bead. There was always a bead that was out of place or the wrong color. And what we were told by the elders, that only the creator can be perfect, that mistake bead, that imperfection is the perfect imperfection, and it becomes the beauty and the difference and the one of a kind, like we are. So it wasn't until I stained it that this imperfection showed. I thought it was a totally clean gourd, and however, it wasn't. So that wasn't painted like that. That was stained. And like the other, I did use the wood burner, but this time I used acrylics. And this is a rear view look of it. It also has a male crown type decor on its head. And the painted line simulates 2 braids, but I did not embellish this with any type of hair. And last but not least, this is the one that I showed you in the demonstration. And I just wanted to mention that the blue dots, I don't know where they came from. Of course, they came from when I was preparing it, but I thought they were so beautiful that I didn't cover it. I could have very easily covered that with the black paint for the hair, but I felt in my heart that they were meant to be there. They were meant to be a part of the look. And when we stained it, it looked like a clean gourd, but if you see the forehead of this No Face Ancestor, you see the freckles that came out. And also what looks like a tear on the cheek. So each one of these creations speak to me. I'm not sure if they speak to anybody else, but they speak to me after the creation as well. And you can tell, I was telling you the other previous gourd, I'll turn back to that was painted with the shellac versus with the oil and beeswax mixture and the beauty that it has. And this is a side view. Okay, so for more information, I have a website, nativeadvancement.com/nativeart. I have many websites, but that's where you can find all these pictures. And I will give it back to Yvetta if there's any other questions.
I am unmuting myself so that I can speak. And yes, there are questions, but first I wanted to say thank you so very much. This was a beautiful presentation, and to more kind words pouring in and thanks into the chat box. You will have an opportunity to look at it after the presentation, but people do appreciate you sharing all this knowledge, and this is amazing. So I would ask you the questions that came in so far. Well, one is more like a comparison that came from Marilyn White. She says, well, the materials of African-American baskets basket makers might be what was or is found here in the US. The designs are the same as their African ancestors from, especially Senegal. Baskets of the exact same designs were made in West Africa for exact same purposes, rice fanners. So she's, from what I understand, this is not exactly a question, this is a comment that is a reference to your comparisons, the ones that you did before. So how designs could be similar or different between the different tribes, but they could be similar with many cultures around the globe. I mean, like the perfect example with diamond patterns in rugs that we can find in Persia, in Turkey, in Mexico, and among the Navajo tribal traditions. So there are many of those similarities that could be found. So perhaps you can comment on that. I mean, can you see
Sure.
similarities among different cultures?
Um, I know in my heart that we are one, and we all come from one. And since we all are one, we all are related. This universe was made, and we're human beings, and we use things as are needed. And we'll find similarities, like you said. We find similarities in South America that are similar to Egypt, and no one knows why. And no one knows exactly how long anybody's been anywhere. The more we find that, there are ancient bones here that go back to 100,000 years, but no one knows before that. So we don't know about, the paleo time. No one knows for sure about the Bering Strait, and where, the human beings come from. But we are all one, and ancestrally, we all have similarities, and it's in our DNA, and we cannot escape what's in our DNA, and we cannot escape from who we are. So if we're creating something, we're creating it because that's what's in our heart, and we don't know why. No one's going to know why. No one's ever going to know. But we're all related. Even my book, I have a book that's The Creator's Great Soup, that we're all related. All of our cells and our DNA, no one's any different. There's no different, there's really no different races. We're human. And we all use what's available to us. So there's going to be pine needle trees all around the world. So no one can own anything. We can't own anything. We can't own any design. We all own it. Everybody owns it. It's just like glass, the Wheaton's, the beautiful art. It's inspired. Each piece is inspired by the creator at that moment. Yeah. So, but no one knows the details of why that person thought about that at that moment. There's no defining it. So, and it is all similar. And, just like the drum and the wood instruments, there's the drum in every culture, and the drum beat in every culture, and it represents the heartbeat. And when you have the wood instruments, and there's a gourd instrument, the halusa that I have, and it's made with the same gourds, but they're made in China. And if your gourds go back 13,000 BCE, then your pine needles probably go back to the same, your pottery and glass. It all goes back to necessity and what is available at that moment. So I really do agree with the viewer, and everything is similar because we're all one.
Yes. And it goes back to our need to express ourselves artistically. Mm-hmm. So it is true. There is one question, where is your store? However, I'm not sure whether the guest is referring to your store or the tribal store, but maybe you can answer for both.
Well, I live on a ranch. We have animals, and I have a little trading post, which is, I wrote, my first book is Turkey Tail Trading Post. That's what it's called. And it's not really a store because when I make items, I can't keep enough inventory because I can't mass produce. So I sell oil and tea from my trading post, which is what I make the most. But as far as like any artwork, I don't have a lot of artwork that I sell because I can't keep up with the demand.
Yeah. So, well, there is another question. how do you puncture the gourds to decorate them without shattering them as they are dry?
That is a good question. I use a Dremel. How they did it in my ancestral day, I couldn't even imagine. I use a Dremel, a tiny Dremel.
That works. That works.
Yes, you have to use modern day tools. Yes.
Modern day tools. Well, things change.
Yes.
Traditions
Yep.
change.
We have to evolve with the times or we die.
Uh, exactly. If we don't
We
evolve,
evolve.
we die. So we have to be adaptable.
Mhm.
So you talked a lot about how important it is for you to preserve your cultural heritage, how close you feel to the ancestors, and um, even you showed us how you visualize old stories in your gourds. I mean, the water bearer story is phenomenal. So I wanted to ask a question for both of you. I mean, why? Why is it so important to you to preserve your traditions?
Do you want to go first, Dad?
For you and Mark, if you want to elaborate a bit on this.
Well, one of the things, and I hate to get into it like this, but we had to hide our culture to survive. And 40 some years ago, when we started to bring things out of the closet, we had no idea how much was preserved and the elders were waiting to teach. My mother was one that got her herbal medicine from my grandmother. My mother tried to pass it down to, I know that there were 3 girls there at one time, but you can only pass it down to the ones who want to receive it. And Tyrese was one of those who really grasped everything that my mother had to offer. And I'm just going to do this. I'm so proud of my daughter because I never thought that it was going to go this far and still be safe. She's one of the few that is willing to teach others when they come to her. Show me this. Okay, this is how I do it. And if we don't do it in that fashion, if it's just like right now, I have to make a rattle for a historical society. They want to pay me for it. But see, one of the things that I'm proud of her for what she does is the fact that if you earn it and you deserve it, you will have it. And Thais doesn't do, other than that little store that she has, she doesn't do things to sell. She gives things away. And that is our way. And that is how the next person learns. She teaches everything that she does. So is it important? Yes, because the old ways, if I started to tell you some of the phrases, I don't know if you'd understand, like, ain't no hill to a climber. That comes from my family. I don't know if you know what it means or not, but that means nothing you can't do if you put your mind to it. And see, there's all those teaching that we do kind of, I call it sideways, that if you want to understand, you will grasp it immediately. And I don't know. It's something that, like I said, I make rattles and drums. And when people come out to my house, it enthuses me so much that what they want to learn that I can get out of my laziness and make something right away. That's that's exactly what it is, so that we can transfer it to the next generation. I talked too much already. Go ahead, Ty.
I just want to say that I always heard my great grandmother died exactly 1 month to the day before I was born. But yet I know about nannies, and she was a keeper of the herbs, and that was my grandmother's mother. And I knew her personality, and I could relate to her, and I could visualize what her life was like because my family kept her alive. And I just experienced this recently, when my mother passed away, my daughter and I, that same weekend, had planned to go to her house in Dover that weekend that she passed away. And she was going to tell my mother that she was pregnant with my first grandbaby. And believe it or not, my first grandbaby is the embodiment of my mother. And she has her spirit and she has her look, and she's intrigued with knowing everything about my mother. And she asks, and she'll say, I miss Nana Phyllis, and she's never met her. So, and that's the part, those are the traditions that are kept alive. It's nothing to do with the art forms that have evolved. It has nothing to do with the clothing style or where we live in our housing, but it has everything to do with our family and our family ties and our generational contact that we have with our grandchildren and our great grandchildren. And even though those have passed on, we keep them alive. Everybody knows who Uncle Doob is. And my children, I was pregnant with my daughter when he passed away, but everybody knows Uncle Doob. You know, we keep the stories alive. And therefore, when you do, you know why you do the things you do. And you know why you have these certain personality traits, and you know why you have, maybe some, are a little more spirited than others. But if we did not know our ancestors, then we would not know who we are. We would not be able to keep ourselves, we say, oh, it's okay. I'm not good at reading either. And neither was your grandmother, you was your grandmother, because, and it's okay. When you find out why something happens and you find out that it's generational, then it's okay. So those are the traditions that we have to keep alive, and everybody stays alive from the stories. And my dad's one of the most avid storytellers and he doesn't even realize it, but my children and my grandchildren are on his every word, as we were. And then we know why we have these certain traits or these certain habits or why we do, what we do. See, so those are the things those are the traditions that's the real tradition. That is the real tradition.
Yeah, and people are saying that they love that you put your children in the video that you just showed us in your presentation. It makes it more personal.
Yes, it is.
More real.
It is. It is. And I will have to tell everybody that it was very difficult for me to open up my life like this, because we are very private people. We're very personal, but that's what I know is family. And to not include my family would not be me. Would not be my tradition and my culture.
I understand. And believe me, Tyrese, people appreciate it. If you can just read the chat, they do appreciate it. They find it beautiful. They're grateful for your sharing. And like father, like daughter, you like giving away things. So do you have any final thoughts that you want to share with us, you and Mark?
I'm really elated that you gave us this opportunity. And there are so many other tribal artists out there that hopefully this is just the beginning. Hopefully that through your outlet and your generosity like this, that maybe we can bring a few more out of the woodwork, because they're there. And, like I said, this was out of my comfort zone to be here and knowing that there's all these people watching. But, I think that everybody else we need to engage them as well. We need to reach out to them. And I know, Iveta, you have done that for many years. You have engaged with our artists and recognized our artists. And and it's such a blessing to have you as a part of our tribe, because this would have never happened if it weren't for you and over 20 years of, you know, let's get this out there. Let's do this. You know, you're an artist, just like you told me you're an artist, you know, but you know,
I did, and you didn't believe me.
I did not know. I did not believe you. I still don't, because, you know, really, yeah.
Thank you so very much, Tyrese. I mean,
Thank
20 years is a long time.
It is a long time. It
Kind
is
of grew up with the tribe.
yeah, and when I look at the old pictures that you sent me, I'm like, I don't recognize that person.
Yes, this is 20 years
do.
ago at WheatonArts, yes.
Yes, I did not recognize that. So,
But Thais, before you praise her too much, don't forget she got me lost in China.
I know. You were supposed to take his leash.
Yes, yes.
You didn't take his leash. He got lost.
Scared, huh?
He found his way, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. He did beautifully. And not only that, but he made so many people in China happy to meet a Native American person for the first time in their lives. And
Yes.
I do remember the people in the Ministry of Culture bowing to you, Mark.
Oh. And you know, it's just like the lady that said something about the baskets in made in other cultures and other. It's the same. When he was in China, he was elated to meet them like they were brothers.
Yes.
Because of the similarities. And they're in China.
And it looks far away. It looks far away.
And it was far away, yeah, but it was familiar. You know, so it's like, you know, we are all one. And culturally, when you go into some of those ancient cultures like that, you find that you're very similar.
That is true. Thank you so very much again. Maybe we should wrap it up now. I don't see any further questions, just amazing comments on your presentation.
Yes, thank you all very much. It was a pleasure being part of this program and to listen to all the stories and the reminiscing and so forth. And I'll just go ahead and add a few things. And again, thank you, Thais and Mark. This has been wonderful.
Hey, Shanna, I saw you.
And you may enjoy the chat as well.
Yeah,
and I'm putting
kids
blog here, and I did put all those links in the chat. And if anybody wants to contact Thais and Mark, they can through any of those links that I shared. And if you would like to talk to Yvetta or get more information from Yvetta, this is her email, ipirgava@wheatonarts.org. And two more reminders. One reminder is the shop WheatonArts.org, and our hours are open hours, 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. Saturdays and Sundays. And whoops, maybe I missed it. Well, I wanted to remind you about the next Wheaton conversation, and that I also put that link in the chat. So if you would like to get a copy of the chat, if you can't download it, then let me know at mpeterson@wheatonarts.org. And thank you all. Again, good night.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.